Shane, saw you had a piece on Collin Morikawa, the kind of the vibes around the media and the players during the Players' Week. And Morikawa, one of the guys that you had referenced. Your impressions of what Collin had to share when it came to his sentiment that he didn't know the media or, I guess, fans or anyone, anything after Bay Hill and doubling down on those comments last week.
Yeah, so what I just wrote in Golf Digest was I really, from a media perspective, don't like that framework of what do we owe someone. Because, if I say, yes, he does owe us comments, I sound entitled. If I say, no, he doesn't, I'm arguing for my own obsolescence because what is the point of me at that point? I don't owe it to a server at my local restaurant to be polite to that server. But there are things we do in this life because it is good for us. It's good for other people. And the point I wanted to make, as we saw Morikawa have those comments and a couple of other players seem to be very, very frosty toward the media, is I don't think we need to be enemies, right? I don't think we need to frame it as, what do you owe me? What do I get from you? I'm not a leech, right? Even though some people think journalists are leeches, I promise you I'm not. We're not all like Eamon Lynch. Some of us have good hearts and we want to do our best. Of course, I'm just kidding. But no, I think really the way we should frame that question is, how can we work best together? How can we write great stories? How can you, work with media that you trust to really do good work?
Rex, let's frame that question in a slightly different way. Okay, Collin Morikawa doesn't owe Shane Ryan anything because he's media, but does he owe the consumer of his product something? The fans who had invested the Sunday or perhaps days and months supporting Collin Morikawa, does he owe them something at the end? Because, we've seen, I've attacked Greg Norman for everything over the last few years, but Greg Norman at least sat and answered questions in some of the toughest situations you're ever going to face as a professional athlete. He never walked away from any of them because I think he understood that it wasn't just the media he was talking to, it was the fans who were invested in the product.
And I agree with Collin Morikawa straight out of the gates. He doesn't owe the media anything, and my guess is most fans don't really care about what we need and what we don't need as members of the media. However, to your point, yes, 100% he owes the fans an explanation. You try to open the door a little bit and tell the fan what was going on that Sunday afternoon when things weren't going your way. He certainly owes the sponsors. He owes the media partners. There are people that he owes something to, but no, not the media. And I will go back to the idea that you brought up, Greg Norman. I would argue that Phil Mickelson's interview at Wingfoot after he had blown that lead was one of the greatest interviews I've ever listened to. And it's because he gave us a glimpse behind the door of exactly what was going through his mind, exactly how difficult this was and how stupid he felt in that moment. Go back to last year at Pinehurst. I wonder if Rory would have stopped, what his answers would have been like, as opposed to what they were a few weeks later when we caught up with him at the Scottish Open. As a member of the media, of course, I want the player to stop, to try to tell the story. It makes it easier. However, if they need, let's say, an hour to calm down, I think that's not out of the realm of possibility. I'm more than willing to give a player whatever leeway they want to try to tell that story.
Shane, is this as much, on the player as it is the PGA Tour? Because I've covered other sports, and they have a specific cool-off period as well as then locker room access if you're covering the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball. In tennis, you have to talk after a Grand Slam, win or lose. But there isn't this set structure. It's more voluntary where a player can opt in or out.
Well, I would say, I think to Rex's point, I agree with him in the sense that I think it's better for the player, better for the fans, better for everyone if they do speak after these hard losses, because it will, I don't want to use the word character, but it will show something about their character. As Eamon said, even Greg Norman would do that after his tough Masters losses. I think it should be something that they want to do because of what it says about them. Yeah, they can escape. There's no obligation for it. Even waiting an hour, I think, is just a little bit too much. It just, these are not, nobody's dying here, right? This is sports in the end. You haven't lost anybody. It is painful. I don't doubt that. However, I think it's very little to ask that because we live in a world where you can make millions of dollars, and the only reason you can do that playing golf is because people care about it, to see this as something that as professionals we do. And I wouldn't be the first person to say that this was a standard, right? 30 years, it doesn't matter how devastating it is. Greg Norman, Tom Watson, no matter what, they came and they spoke. And I think that says something, and I think that's a nice thing to do.
Well, we may not be able to rely on players talking to us, but at least we can rely on media talking to media. Always illuminating, guys. Thanks for joining us.